All right, Ken, I know you've been telling, parts of this story for the last year or so. What do you think you want people to get out of this book and what's in there?
Well, I mean, there's really three different parts to the book, and I think each one of them is important. The front end is the piece where everybody has the most interest right now, which is what the work was that I did for the Trump campaign, the issues that I addressed, the fraud claims that I found false. The middle part of the book, I think, is even more important than the front of the book, which is the specific reasons why Trump lost it. When I evaluated the data and took a look at things early in 2023, it's crystal clear that the reason that President Trump lost the race in the swing states was due to his loss of support from the moderate Republicans who he denigrates as rhinos. It's crystal clear. And I even found a poll that his pollster did after the election that confirms my findings as well. And for me, the most important part of the book is the last piece, where I talk about the things that we should be doing to make our elections better across the country.
And you laid out some of them, and kind of like more of a national standard, so to speak, is one of them.
For sure, national standards is one of them. I have a lot of trivia about our federal elections, and one of my favorite examples of how the differences in the way states conduct their elections impact our elections would be what happens to your vote if you vote early and then die before the election. And the answer is it depends on where you live. In some states, the vote counts. In other states, the vote doesn't count. And in yet other states, there is no law that addresses that situation at all, like in Rhode Island, even though Rhode Island counts the vote. So when Rhode Island counts the vote of somebody who dies before the election who votes early, they're doing so without a foundation in law. It's a mess, and that's just one example of a great many things that are broken with how our elections work.
Right, but that's the lasting effect, the lasting impact you want people to take away from the work that you did, right? Is that something needs to change here?
Oh, 100%. We need some national guidance in terms of standards for the way that our elections are run. Another great example for how things are really broken is some states give you their data effectively for free, like big states like New York and Pennsylvania and Florida and California. And then there are states like Alabama that charge you $37,000 for their data. There are tremendous differences. And in neighboring Massachusetts, you cannot get the state's voter data. They tell you that you have to go visit each Massachusetts municipality individually, and there's more than 350 of them. So these are just broad examples of things that are really broken across the board. And I'm leaving out of it states that do a great job at keeping their data clean and other states that do just a terrible job at it.
All right. So I will have to get into the Trump stuff. So
Sure.
They basically reached out to you. Was that in 2020?
Yeah, they reached out to me just a day or two after the election. A lawyer named Alex Cannon called me out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to do the work.
And what was your thought there? Was kind of the task laid out that you were looking into election fraud?
He had asked me to data mine for voter fraud for the campaign in the swing states. I guess ultimately I'm not really surprised that they reached out to me, although I was wholly surprised that they reached out to me because I wasn't expecting it. We signed a contract after I worked out with him some important details. For example, I wanted him to understand that in a decade of looking at voter data, I hadn't seen anything close to what I knew the campaign needed me to find. And I wanted to make sure he understood I wasn't making any promises. And he indicated that he understood that and appreciated my honesty about it. And that's what he was looking for, which to me is one of the more remarkable things about my story. There were Trump lawyers who were doing their due diligence, and Alex Cannon was one of them.
Right. So they didn't say to you, "We want you to find this."
No. In fact, he wanted me to give it an honest look. And he even told me that to enable me to do that, he was making sure that my identity wasn't known up the chain of command and into the White House so that political pressure wouldn't be brought upon me as I did my work.
All right. So in a nutshell, what did you find in the course of your work, and how did you get there?
So there were a couple ways I got there. I was contracted to look to determine if there were deceased voters in the swing states, and also, to the best that I could in the time that we had, look for people voting twice in one state and also another state where those duplicate votes included a vote in the swing states. That's what the data mining piece of it was. And we found some dead voters and we found some duplicate voters, but nowhere near enough to have changed the election result in any state. And while all that was happening, which was already a monumental amount of work, the campaign started sending me claims of voter fraud that other people had made. And those claims included claims made by names that we all recognize, like John Eastman and Sidney Powell, and in a lot of cases, names that nobody has ever heard of before, at least not on a national level. And every one of those claims of fraud, I was able to prove to the campaign that those claims were false. And I was able to, in conjunction with the campaign lawyers, we stopped a lot of bad lawsuits from happening. Not that there weren't still 60 bad lawsuits that were all thrown out, but there were lawsuits that never got filed because of the work that I did.
So did you ever get any pushback from the campaign about
no,
finding nothing?
The only person that I interacted with was Alex Cannon, who had a strong interest in the truth in terms of what I was finding, and his commitment that I would have no political pressure put on me.
And so, as I've mentioned, you've been talking about this now for quite some time, that, and been on national news outlets, as you said. Have you ever gotten any flack from or heard anything from Trump or his people in response to that?
I haven't. In fact, it's been for all the national interest in it. My whole positioning in talking about all of this is it's just the facts. I was paid to find proof of fraud that would stand up in court, and then we didn't come close to that. And that's a key thing. There've been so many claims of fraud that are just hearsay. I saw someone do something, sort of like Rudy Giuliani and his defamation of Ruby Freeman, just lies and hearsay. And those claims by default will never stand up in court. I was looking at actual evidence that could survive legal scrutiny, and was wholly unable to find it. And the Trump campaign accepted that fact from me. They communicated that fact to Mark Meadows, who was Trump's chief of staff at the time. And news reports show that Mark Meadows took that finding directly into the Oval Office.
But then other people came into play and kind of ran with other claims?
Oh, I mean, there were many claims of fraud that never found their way to my desk. I mean, there was only 35 days in which to do everything that I was asked to do. Most of the claims, all the claims that came to me were claims that were based on data. Any other claim that was hearsay in nature, like the Ruby Freeman claim, people claiming they found a bunch of ballots in a ditch, almost everything that came out of Arizona, those weren't data-driven claims, and I never saw those because they're just hearsay and they're not admissible evidence in court anyway.
So I guess, what do you think that, now going into the next election, Donald Trump continues to say the election was stolen? Like, what do you think when you hear him repeatedly say that?
He has no foundation in fact for those claims. He just doesn't. Most people understand that. Many people within his campaign apparatus in 2020 understood that. His chief of staff in 2020 accepted that as truth. And his attorney general at the time, who resigned in December of 2020, William Barr, also looked at many, many claims of voter fraud independently of anybody else, found them all to be false as well. There is no confirmed claim of voter fraud that has been issued by President Trump since the 2020 election.
Just fine. What do you think of all the national attention that you're getting because of this? I mean, do you feel like, people are interviewing you because, they want to disprove Trump, or what do you think about the attention you're getting?
It's excellent for selling books. And it is really interesting just looking at it, stepping back a little bit. I'm the guy that the Trump campaign hired to look for voter fraud that would survive legal scrutiny, and I couldn't find it. And it's been 3.5 years since I did this work, I've been sitting on it for different reasons at different periods of time, and it wasn't appropriate to talk about it in 2020, 2021. Feelings were too raw, and there was no receptiveness. There would be no receptiveness to hearing these facts. Once it became publicly known that I had done this work in the middle of 2023, and I received the subpoenas from Jack Smith and Fonnie Willis in Georgia, I knew that I really needed to get this book written because it was going to be public anyway, and I thought it was super important to talk about what I did with my own framing and my own storytelling, because having somebody else frame what I did leaves open to misinterpretation the importance of my findings. And what I'm talking about, I talk about strictly from the foundation of facts.
All right. Right. And so investigators, did you give them what you found? Is that basically?
Every shred of communication I had with the Trump campaign was subpoenaed by both Jack Smith's federal investigation in DC and Fonnie Willis's Fulton County, Georgia investigation.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
We could talk for 3 days about all of this. I think at a high level, this probably covers it.